Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. My name is Elisa Arnheim, and I'm host of the Healthy Gut, Happy Child Summit. Nourish your child, release their vitality, and watch them thrive. Our children are experiencing skyrocketing rates of autoimmune disease, allergies, autism, eczema, asthma, food sensitivities, behavioral issues, and more. And many of you know that these things can all be tied to the gut. Our kids are also in the first generation that is expected to live shorter lives than their parents, and this is totally unacceptable. So I've gathered the foremost leaders in supporting children's gut health. They're here to give you their strategies, their experience-based wisdom, and the most progressive, cutting-edge science in everything from food to medicine to lifestyle, so that you know exactly what to do to help your child thrive. And today I am so delighted and honored to be here with Dr. Elisa Song.
Hi, Alyssa. I'm so excited to be with you. Hi.
Oh, this is so great. Holistic Mama Doc, Dr. Elisa Song is a holistic pediatrician, pediatric functional medicine expert, and mama to two crazy fun kids. In her integrative pediatric practice, Whole Family Wellness, which you can find at wholefamilywellness.org, she's helped thousands of kids get to the root causes of their health concerns and help their parents understand how to help their children thrive, body, mind, and spirit, by integrating conventional pediatrics with functional medicine, homeopathy, acupuncture, herbal medicine, and essential oils. These health concerns have ranged from frequent colds, ear infections, asthma, and eczema to autism, ADHD, anxiety, depression, and autoimmune illnesses. Dr. Song is the host of her own Thriving Child Summit, a life-changing event for parents to learn how to help their children thrive. Dr. Song created Healthy Kids, Happy Kids to share her advice and adventures as a holistic pediatrician and mama. Now everyone can have their very own virtual holistic pediatrician. You can follow her blog at healthykidshappykids.com and get daily tips and inspiration from her on Facebook at Dr. Elisa Song MD on Facebook. And again, welcome, Dr. Song.
Thank you, Alyssa.
So,
I'm honored to be part of your summit. This is great.
Thank you. Well, let's get started by hearing about your personal journey to becoming an integrative pediatrician. How'd you get?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people ask me, how did I come to do this work? Right? How did I leave conventional medicine? Was it a personal or a family health crisis? Which is how many practitioners find holistic care and functional medicine. And that actually wasn't the case for me. I grew up in a very pretty conventional household. My mother was an OBGYN, and there was nothing really natural and integrative in our household. But I knew that I wanted to work with kids always. And so when I went to undergraduate, I was going to be a teacher, or I was going to be a health policy advocate, an education advocate. And I actually thought about going to law school and becoming a civil rights lawyer. And I found this conference. It was crazy. It was down here in the Bay Area because I was at Stanford at the time. This was back in 2005, I believe. Actually, no, it wasn't. It was 1995. I'm dating myself. So it was 1995 where there was this conference of the American Holistic Medical Association. And it was one of its first conferences. And there were two people who were keynote speakers that were just becoming known. And they were Deepak Chopra and Andrew Weil. And this was, right when they were just paving the way, about the importance of holistic care. And I was fascinated. I was hooked, and I thought, wow, I want to become a naturopathic doctor, and I want to become a holistic doctor. And of course, no one in my family knew at all what an MD was at that point. So I was veered away from that. But even in medical school, so I went to medical school, and every year, it just didn't feel right to me. it wasn't what I was looking for to do with my life, and not the way I want to help kids. And the same thing with residency. I ended up at UCSF for Peds residency, and every year I thought, wow, we are just putting Band-Aids on symptoms. We are just seeing these kids who are sick, and we're not practicing prevention. We're not helping them heal. We're just making them sicker with our treatments. And sometimes those treatments are important and they can be life-saving, but what happens after those treatments? We're not strengthening them. We're not bolstering them. We're not helping them thrive. And so it was at that point that I just said, I need to find another way. And so, I took the training through the Institute for Functional Medicine. In fact, I think I was the first pediatrician to take the training program with them in 2004. And I found clinical homeopathy and acupuncture and essential oils and herbs. And it just opened up wide open, a way that we can really help our kids heal if they're sick, and also really keep them healthy. So hopefully they don't get sick. So it's been inspiring, so inspiring, because I see kids in my practice who have been very sick with autism or autoimmune illness, anxiety, sensory issues, you name it, and they can get better, they can recover, and they can heal. And that's what keeps me going. And, it was about time, 10 years into this holistic pediatric practice, for me to say, I have to get the word out there, just like you're doing, right, Elisa, with the summit. I mean, we have to get the word out there to parents everywhere that this is the way that our kids are going to get better. Not with conventional medicine alone, there is a place for that, but really with a truly holistic approach. And that's why I did the Thriving Child Summit last year, which is amazing. And I'm doing it again this year, Elisa. So I can't wait to share that with you in the fall, in October, September, when it comes out. And that's why I started Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, because I can't see enough patients in the office. There's only so many hours in the day, and I've had to actually close my practice because it was just getting too full, and I was not having time to nurture my own kids and nurture my family relationships and myself. So this was a way for me to feel like, I can still help families, even if they can't come into the office to see me. I can still help them find a better way. So that's my story. So it's not a terribly interesting story, but that's how I came to it, and I love it. I would never practice any other way.
I love your story. Thank you so much for doing the work you're doing, and
thank you.
As many people as possible, because I really truly believe that the messages that are so important to you, that drove you through your career to the place where you are essential for all of our kids and families.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about the gut microbiome and why you think it's so important to start a child's life off with a healthy gut.
Well, so I love that you named your summit the Healthy Gut, Happy Child, because that is truly when parents who come to see me and parents who read the information on my blog site or follow me on Facebook, they know the gut is key. The gut is really where everything starts. Even in Chinese medicine, it's the spleen, stomach meridians that govern digestion that are the most foundational meridians in Chinese medicine to really get our kids healthy. And one thing that I tell parents is that really, the gut microbiome, we have this golden opportunity before kids are 2 years of age to shape their microbiome, because after 2, it is very, very difficult to change the composition of the gut microbiome. It's not impossible, but it's more challenging. That's why we've linked early antibiotic use in that first year of life to chronic conditions like asthma and eczema. So the more we can do in the beginning to establish a healthy gut microbiome, keep it healthy, the more we're going to prevent all of these chronic illnesses in our kids. So that's why I think before 2 years of age, we really, really need to focus on how to do that for our kids.
Yes, we sure do. So what are the health implications of having an imbalanced gut? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how we can prepare right through pregnancy into prenatal.
Yeah, absolutely. So really the gut, again, when I start working with kids, whether they have, a serious chronic health condition like, rheumatoid arthritis or Crohn's disease, or whether they're having asthma flares, eczema flares, I always start with the gut. And I tell parents, even if their symptoms aren't in their gut, right? If their parents are saying, but it's their lungs, they're having asthma exacerbations, I say it starts in the gut, right? If you heal the gut, if you start with the gut, you will get probably at least 75% better, if not all the way better, right? And so it really is important to start with the gut. And when we have imbalances in our gut microbiome, that's something called gut dysbiosis, right? That's a fancy term for just abnormal bugs inhabiting our gut. And they can be abnormal bacteria. They can be too little of the good bugs, the probiotics. They can be parasites. It can be yeast. It can be viral infections. But this gut dysbiosis sets up the stage for having dysregulation in our gut environment, which then creates these little leaks in our intestinal lining, something called a leaky gut, which then manifests as your child being sensitive to almost everything they're eating. The sensitivities these are not anaphylactic immediate allergies. These are not ones that are necessarily obvious. These are what we call delayed allergies or sensitivities, and may not show up in your child for 3 or 4 or 5 days after ingesting a food. And they are linked to the foods that our kids eat the most commonly. And so with the leaky gut, then we know that leaky gut itself is linked with many, many chronic pediatric illnesses like ADD, autism, autoimmune illness, learning differences, anxiety, obesity, diabetes. Just leaky gut alone can help, healing the leaky gut. And we'll talk about how to do that later on. But just healing a leaky gut will, again, get your kids on that road to health in such an amazing way. And one of the things that can be challenging about all of this, Elisa, as you know, and the work that you're doing is thinking about how to change kids' diets. And we can certainly go into that, but we can do it. We can do it, and we must do it for our kids. And the principles of healing a leaky gut, they're easy sounding, they're fairly simple, but they're not always easy to implement. And that's where you really need someone who can walk it through with you, like a health coach or a great nutrition consultant.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned, well, how do we start off though, right? With a healthy gut? How do we keep our kids' guts from being disrupted in the first place? And that starts before you even start to try to get pregnant. If I can get to a mama before she conceives, 3 to 6 months before at a minimum, and get to the papa too, right? I mean, we really, we need to focus on both partners' health. But very importantly, if that mama's gut is disrupted, if her microbiome is dysregulated, she's going to very easily pass that on to her child. We know now that intestinal bacteria from the mom actually does pass through the placenta into the baby. So whatever is in that mama's gut, and many, many moms have yeast overgrowth or an overgrowth of abnormal bacteria. It's so common. And so if we can heal your gut before you start to get pregnant, not only will you get pregnant easier, but you'll have a healthier pregnancy and your child will come out healthier, right? And so how do we do that? For mamas, if they have any gut dysbiosis, they can work with the functional medicine practitioner to heal it, taking various herbs or even pharmaceuticals if needed, but primarily taking probiotics, right? And eating fermented foods and eating a diet really rich in phytonutrients. What is that, right? That's eating a rainbow. All of those different colors in a fruit or a vegetable provides different minerals and different vitamins that help support our gut lining and support our immune system. And the healthier mama's immune system can be and mama's gut can be, the healthier your baby is going to be when they're born. Right? We have genetic factors that we bring with us. If everyone in your family has had asthma, well, there's a high chance that your baby might have asthma. However, if you are healthy during your pregnancy and you take probiotics, we know that there's a much lower chance that your baby will develop asthma, right? Your genetics are not written in stone. We can affect how our genes are expressed. So this is also where mamas, once they're pregnant, if they do get sick, which happens, right? If you're pregnant in the wintertime, you might get a bronchitis. If you're pregnant any time of the year, you might get a UTI. And there are times where you might need antibiotics. Antibiotics, unfortunately, are overused, but there is a time and a place for them. And for some moms, they have to take antibiotics. But if they do, take those probiotics and eat those fermented foods to make sure those good stuff, the good bugs, get right back in.
Mm.
Many of our moms have reflux. Of course, I mean, I had terrible reflux, especially my third trimester. I mean, that baby, is pushing up against your belly, right against your stomach. We know that antacid use during pregnancy, unfortunately, has been linked with disruptions in not just mom's gut microbiome, but also babies, and an increased risk for asthma and eczema and allergies in that baby. So this is where acupuncture, herbal medicine, homeopathy can play a really important role. And of course, if you're pregnant, you want to be careful. You want to make sure you work with a knowledgeable practitioner to make sure everything you're doing is safe. But guaranteed, there are going to be some natural options to help you feel better, and hopefully try to avoid any medications that you may need. And the final piece is stress. Right? I mean, who's not stressed nowadays? But it's amazing. They found that maternal stress alone affects the gut microbiome of that baby once they're born. Wow. Yes. Wow. Right? That mind body, that gut brain connection, it's real for us. It's real for our babies. And so, learning and practicing mindfulness, taking things off your plate, figuring out ways to reduce stress, being out in nature, right? All of those things can help you reduce your stress response, which then supports your adrenals as a mother, and that supports your baby to be really as healthy as they can be when they come out, right? The other things that we know also can really affect the gut microbiome right at birth is the way our babies are born, right? And also the way our babies are fed from the beginning. And, these are things, sometimes a cesarean section is just unavoidable. And, this is not to make any mama feel guilty if they've had a C-section, but we know that when babies are born by C-section, they are colonized mostly in their gut with skin bacteria, right? Skin bacteria from surgeons, skin bacteria from the mama's belly, and not with all of that good bacteria from the mama's, vaginal canal. So if your babies are born by C-section, there are some hospitals that are doing some amazing work with taking vaginal swabs from the mama and swabbing the baby's mouth and nose and rectum to try to colonize that baby a little more naturally. But for those babies in particular, I do recommend probiotics for them, and of course probiotics for the moms. And then nursing. Right? Nursing provides so many benefits to baby and mom, which go beyond just the nutritional benefits. And we can spend a whole, 2 hours talking about the benefits of breastfeeding. And I absolutely understand there are some mamas who just aren't going to be able to produce milk for whatever reason, or need to supplement with formula, but every little bit counts. And if you're able to nurse, even just a little bit, that baby is going to get all those good prebiotics from your milk, right? All of those good oligosaccharides to help support your gut lining, and probiotics from breast milk. So those are the things, if we had a choice during preconception and pregnancy, I would say, please, mamas, get healthy before you try to get pregnant. Make sure your gut is in order. Take probiotics before and during pregnancy. If you can find alternatives to antibiotics, if that's a possibility, and hope for the best to have that beautiful vaginal birth, and work with a good lactation consultant to nurse.
There's a lot there, and it's all doable. I love it. So what about when your baby is born? How do you know if their gut is dysregulated, and what do you do about it?
So sometimes the gut dysregulation isn't obvious. Sometimes it is. Sometimes from birth, parents will say, every time my baby feeds, whether it's at the breast or the bottle, they're crying and they're arching and they're spitting up, and they may actually have reflux. Now, I will say, as an aside, more and more infants are being diagnosed with reflux, when I don't truly believe that all of them have reflux. I think we have a lower tolerance for that normal spitting up and the fussiness that babies go through. Yes, some babies do need those antacids, but like I mentioned before, those absolutely change the pH of not just your stomach, but your intestinal environment, and it's going to foster the growth of, certain bacteria that aren't the most friendly for us, because all of these bacteria, good and bad, prefer a certain pH balance in our gut. And so, right away from birth, if your babies are showing signs of having distress, GI distress, whether they're having too many loose poops or they're getting constipated, which babies really shouldn't. Again, we can give them probiotics to help regulate that, but that's one of the early signs. Another sign is through the skin. You know, our leaky gut and our gut dysregulation very often manifest in the skin. So those babies who are developing eczema, you know, sometimes from birth they're born with dry, itchy skin, but sometimes it's when they start solids. But that's a clear indication that there's some gut disruption and some leaky gut going on. Now, just so our listeners know, all babies are pretty much born with a leaky gut. And the leaky gut matures over time, probably between somewhere around 4 to 6 months of age, which is why in general we've recommended waiting to start solids until then and only using breast milk, right, or formula during that time to feed. But at a certain point, our leaky gut heals and our babies can start handling food introduction. If your baby starts out at birth or at 2 months of age before they started solids with eczema, that typically indicates that mama also has a leaky gut. That mama has some food sensitivities that she's passing on through her breast milk and that the baby is reacting, right? So when I work with infants, it's really important for me to work with the mama and the baby together if they're nursing, right? Because they're intimately connected and you can't really heal the infant if you're not going to heal the mama at the same time, right? Now, other factors that go into play to really dysregulate our children's gut microbiome, you know, I mentioned antibiotics. You know, this is where our integrative natural medicines toolkit can play a huge role in helping to treat these infections without necessarily needing antibiotics. But again, sometimes antibiotics are needed, but we need to support our gut. Our kids' diets, we are failing our children with what we're allowing the government to put into our foods. Right? You know, nowhere in the world do they put the amount of artificial flavors and colors and preservatives and sweeteners in their foods. So it's really this, what we call the SAD diet, right? The standard American diet that our kids are subjected to for the most part. You know, probably even in utero for many of our babies because our mamas don't know any better and they're craving that Big Mac, right? So eating that whole foods diet is going to go a long way in preventing that dysregulation. Stress, right? I mentioned mama stress, but our kids are stressed. Our kids are overscheduled, and that is causing gut disruption. It goes both ways. You know, I mentioned that gut-brain connection, and if our gut is disrupted, 70 to 80, maybe 90% of the serotonin, which is our feel-good neurotransmitter, our brain chemical, and at least that much dopamine, which is our reward hormone, it helps with focus and attention, is made by our gut lining, right? So if our gut is disrupted, we're not going to have enough serotonin to handle stress and anxiety and be resilient, and we're not going to have enough dopamine to have proper focus and attention in school. So your kids with anxiety, tantrums, behavioral issues, ADD symptoms, that's why we look at the gut first, right? And then the same thing, though, emotional stress. You know, when our kids are stressed about their homework or performing or whatever it might be, just the lack of downtime because they're so scheduled, that emotional stress looks the very same to our body and our gut as physiologic stress. Our body doesn't know the difference, right? That emotional stress creates just as much inflammation as if they had the flu or as if they had, you know, some other infection going on. And part of that stress also is sleep, right? Our kids are not getting enough sleep. And, you know, partly it's, again, this overscheduling and having to wake up so early for school, you know, before their bodies are ready and their brains are ready. And it's the screens that are disrupting the production of their melatonin. So, you know, all of these things really kind of come together to make it so difficult for our kids to maintain a healthy gut. And that's where having this knowledge as parents, we can take these measures, right, to really keep their gut healthy as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
So how are we going to help our children thrive? Tell us.
Yes.
And
yes.
Body, mind, and spirit. These are the arenas you address, and you get amazing results for the children you work with.
Yeah. Now, I did mention, right, that we have to start with our gut, right, for any condition. Um, and what impacts the gut? It's food, right? It's food. And so just like, I mean, most of us would never think but to put premium gasoline in our cars. We need to think about our children's gut in the same way. You don't want anything but the best ingredients, right? The premium ingredients to nurture your child's engine. If we don't do that, right? What happens if we don't put the best gasoline in our car? Eventually, we might start to have some clunks and some bumps, that we feel, and our car might eventually not stop working as well. That very same thing is going on with our kids if we're not putting the best nutrients in. So I want parents to think about that, right? Think about how you would nurture your garden, right? If you're growing tomatoes, you're going to have the best, richest soil. You're going to have the best organic fertilizer. You're going to water that tomato plant. You're going to give it the best sunlight so you can have the juiciest, plumpest tomato, right? Same thing with our kids. We don't water them appropriately. We don't give them the right sunlight and the right love and the right, ingredients. They're not going to grow up to be as kind of juicy and vital, as they can be, right? So our food, we want to make sure that we're putting all the right stuff in. I mentioned this phytonutrients for our kids. And that means eating a clean, whole foods diet as organic as possible. And I understand that that can be cost prohibitive for many families. So at least then looking at the environmental working groups list, every year they publish a dirty dozen list of the top most heavily sprayed foods. So at least please having those foods be organic. Always on that list are strawberries, bell peppers, and kale, right? So really making sure that those are organic. Reducing, so keep getting the right things in, filtering your water, right? Making sure that your meats are wild, free range, right? Because most parents don't know that, for instance, chicken that aren't free range, they're often fed arsenic to prevent them from getting infections in those coops where they're stuck together and infections spread so rapidly. So knowing, what's going into your kid's body and eliminating everything that you can that doesn't serve your child's body, right? Reducing, all of those excess, the sugar that's in our kids' diet. I'm not saying have no sugar, but be mindful of how much sugar your child is getting and read the labels, because that, delicious vanilla flavored Greek yogurt that your child is getting might have 26 grams of sugar in it, and here you're thinking, wow, this is the most wholesome breakfast with, 18 grams of protein, but yet they're still getting 26 grams of sugar. So reading the label, anything artificial, I think just really doesn't have a role. I mean, Easter comes around, Halloween comes around, the holidays come around, and we're inundated with just, candy. And I'm not going to say I never give my kids candy, because that would be a lie. And if I told you to never, you'd say, well, how can I do that? But there are some better options. I just found we made for Earth Day these little pudding cups where I used organic instant pudding, gluten-free, dairy-free Oreo crumble topping, organic coconut whipped cream. And I found these organically sweetened gummy worms with no artificial colors and flavors. Now, did that treat have a lot of sugar? Yes, but we were doing a fun cooking project, right? And at least I was able to try to find substitutes where I didn't feel, as guilty about letting them have these sweets, because those artificial colors, preservatives, flavors, for some kids, they can handle it fine. But for other kids, especially the kids with attention and behavioral issues, it's like poison to them.
Yeah.
Literally, it's poison to their brain. So if your kids are having ADD symptoms, anxiety, depression, sleep problems, sensory issues, behavioral issues, and tantrums, you want to try cutting those out first of all.
Yeah.
I tell parents, which is shocking to many of them, to find that in the European Union, in the EU, any food that has these artificial preservatives and colors in them have to be labeled that this food may cause behavioral and attention issues in your child.
Yeah.
Right. There's no similar warning in the States, but there should be.
Yeah.
Right. So just being aware. And then, of course, for our kids, they're eating the whole foods diet, try to get those fermented foods in. I do give probiotics and recommend probiotics to my children and to other children. But if we can get our probiotics from fermented foods, that's going to pack more kind of bang for the buck than any probiotic pill you can take. And probiotics can be, my daughter loves sauerkraut and pickles and olives, but not every child does, right? There are some delicious ways to get in probiotics through fermented foods like kefir. And if you're sensitive to dairy, you can have coconut kefir or water kefir. But keep trying, right? Kombucha is another delicious way. Miso soup, right? A lot of kids love miso soup when they go to Japanese restaurants. But you want to keep trying. It can take 40, 50 plus times for a child to actually find a food acceptable. But the earlier you start with those fermented foods and the more you keep trying, the more it becomes part of their palate and the more they enjoy it. So those are some of the ways that we can really try to make sure that our kids' gut stays healthy, even if they have to backslide and, take antibiotics, or they go through a period of stress and they're having irritable bowel symptoms with diarrhea or constipation. We can move back, we just make sure that we move back to that whole foods, phytonutrient-rich diet that's full of fermented foods.
Yeah, and I love that you point out that it can take so many times to finally come around to not be offended even.
That's right. That's right.
Like it, but just getting to a place where they'll have a bite now and then.
Yes. And for some of our pickiest eaters, some of our kids with sensory issues, some of the kids I work with on the autism spectrum, they may literally be eating 2 or 3 different foods and always the same, right? That same exact package of chicken nuggets and that same exact package of mac and cheese. So I'm not expecting your child to eat, sauerkraut or kimchi next week. And it might literally be just having them smell the food, 10 times first, or just touching the food with their finger and just touching it really quickly to their tongue, and then maybe holding it in their mouth for 10 seconds and spitting it out, not even swallowing it. So there are stepwise ways to do that, even for the kids who are the most challenged from a sensory standpoint.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to make sure that the caregivers, the parents, are feeling rewarded that they're participating in the process.
Yes.
And not looking for that, yum, I love sauerkraut as the reward. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely.
Because it really is a process, and just participating in that process I really believe is giving your kids so much benefit. That's
right. If we know that the ultimate goal and the ultimate accomplishment will be a healthy gut and a thriving child, it's worth the effort, right? It's, you just have to count those very small successes. If your child was able to smell, the fermented food without gagging, great. That's a great first step, right? It's baby steps. Right. And we're proud and happy for every one of them because it's leading to the ultimate goal that we want. Yeah,
it sure is. You mentioned probiotics. How I know that it's hard for an adult to choose a probiotic. There are so many options. How do you choose a probiotic for your child?
So that's a great one. And that's a question that I get asked all the time, which is why for the listeners on the summit, I was really happy to be able to offer a free infographic on just that, on choosing your child's probiotic. So that's, ready for download. Elisa has that. So definitely take a look at that. I mentioned earlier that it's really hard to change your gut microbiome after about 2 years of age. So what does that mean? And practically speaking, a baby's gut microbiome and probiotic composition is going to be different when they're under 2. When they're over 2, it pretty much looks like an adult microbiome. And so kids over 2 can get the very same probiotic as an adult. Okay, so if your child's over 2, my kids are 7 and 5 right now, they get the same probiotic that my husband and I do.
Wow.
Okay. If you're under 2, the probiotic composition is a little bit different, the microbiome composition. So under 2 years of age, the predominant species tends to be Bifidobacter species. Over 2, it's mostly Lactobacillus species. Now we still, though, all of us, regardless of our age, do have some Bifidobacter and Lactobacillus species. It's just the composition is a little different. So babies under 2, there are specific infant probiotic formulas out there, that have that different makeup.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of the quantity, how much to give, well, this is where, there are some chewable probiotics on the market out there that do taste pretty good. However, if you look at what's in the bottle, always look at the label.
Yeah.
What I'm looking for is that there are as many species, as many different kinds of probiotics as possible.
Mm-hmm.
With over 70 trillion bacteria in our gut, it doesn't make sense to take just a probiotic that has one lactobacillus species in it, right? It's not going to do as much good as taking a probiotic that has maybe 6 different kinds of lactobacillus species and 7 different kinds of bifidobacter.
Yeah.
Right. So we want as varied a number of kinds of probiotics as possible.
Yeah.
Then the other thing too is the number of colonies in the probiotic.
Huh.
So when you look at your bottle, you're going to see that it says however many CFU per serving. Now, CFU stands for colony forming units.
Uh-huh.
Now, I mentioned before there are a couple of chewable probiotics that are really tasty.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you look at that, there's one in particular that has 1 million CFU.
Wow.
Now, that sounds like a lot, right? However, really for therapeutic value, we want more than that.
Wow.
So for babies, I am routinely giving, these are infants with really bad reflux or constipation or eczema. I'm probably starting off at 5 to 10 billion, right? Billion CFU, colony forming units. For our older kids, elementary, middle school age kids, high school kids who have autism or Crohn's disease or rheumatoid arthritis or asthma, any chronic health condition, I'm giving upwards of 25 billion colony forming units to sometimes 100 billion, especially post antibiotics, if we're really trying to get all that good stuff back in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so that's where, we want to make sure that we know what we're getting, because if you don't get a high quality probiotic that has a lot of different kinds of species and many, many CFU in it, you're just not going to be doing as much good for your child. Right.
Wow.
Yep. And then, the form, there are ways that you can give your child probiotics. There are, for instance, my kids, they can't swallow pills yet. Although I do know some kids, I have a 3.5-year-old in the practice who can swallow pills, so they can learn early. But I just open up our capsule, and the powder, I just sprinkle it onto their food, a little spoon of applesauce or a little spoon of yogurt or whatever they're eating.
Right.
Of course, there are chewables too, if your kids like the flavor of some of those chewables.
Mm-hmm.
And for babies, you can mix that probiotic right into breast milk or into formula, even when they're infants, right? You can just mix them up. And then I usually draw it up with a little syringe and just squirt it into their mouth so they can get it.
Awesome. This is great to hear exactly how to do it, because I know a lot of people have gotten those probiotics home and then they're looking at their kid like, how do I get this in you?
Yep, exactly. Yep. Yeah. There's lots of different ways to give supplements creatively. And, I definitely speak with parents about that all the time in the practice, because some of my kids who are very sick, unfortunately for the time while we're trying to heal them, they might be on 10 different vitamins to try to restore their health, which is a lot. And so you have to get creative in how to give supplements. So of course, mixing it into food is one option. I don't typically recommend mixing it into their favorite food. If yogurt is their absolute favorite food, then don't mix something that has a really, bitter flavor into that, because then they might start not liking that food. Smoothies are great if your kids do smoothies, but even with smoothies, mixing it into a little bit of that smoothie, like in a shot glass, so they can drink that much, they're getting all of it, and then they have the whole rest of their smoothie glass without any other flavor in it. I've made Jell-O for my kids, where I mix in some supplements, right? And so then you have like little Jell-O, supplement shots. You can, things like calcium or some minerals, you can actually bake with them. They're heat tolerant. So that's another idea. So you can get really creative. without necessarily, having huge battles. But again, starting with, if you have, 5 or 6 supplements to give and you're not sure how to get them in, just start with the ones that are the most bland. And probiotics tend to be pretty bland, right?
Yeah.
They tend not to have too much flavor. So that's easy to start with.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for your very specific advice here. This is great.
Yes. Well, I'm all about being practical, right? Because I'm a mama too. And if someone said, here you go, here's 10 different supplements and just get them in somehow.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd go home, and some parents, and I have to say, I'm probably fall into one of these parents, that if you feel like you can't do it all and you can't do it really well or perfectly, you're not going to do it. Right. And, and the whole goal is to not overwhelm, but to empower and make it doable. Right.
Yeah.
And also to let parents know you don't have to do everything at once. It's absolutely fine to start slowly, step by step. And even if you can only get in 3 supplements on any given day, that's fine. Or if you can only get in supplements or probiotics in, once or twice a week, when you have more time in the morning to do that, that's absolutely fine. Every bit counts.
Yeah.
So we want to make this empowering and inspiring for parents to know that you can change, your kids can change and get healthier. And it doesn't have to happen overnight.
So true. So that's probably the most important thing to remember.
Yes.
Small steps.
Yes, absolutely.
And they will make a difference.
Mm-hmm. They absolutely will.
So what is the role of integrative medicine in treating these common childhood illnesses? What do you do when someone comes to you with an acute earache?
So that's a great question. I think, I do use homeopathy, essential oils, herbal medicine, and acupressure that I teach parents. And I integrate that with conventional pediatrics. So, I always do have a backup of prescribing antibiotics if needed. However, when you have this integrative approach and have a natural medicines toolkit, you will hands down get to a point where you are significantly reducing the need for antibiotics for your child or other medications like steroids for your child asthma exacerbations. So for instance, with ear infections, ear aches are the number one reason for a pediatrician's office, right? Your child's ear hurts, you're wondering, do they have an ear infection? When you have an earache, and even if your child has an actual ear infection, there are many, many different options. And I can probably count in the past 10 years, count on the fingers of both hands how many times I've needed to use antibiotics for ear infections. Whereas before, when I was practicing just completely conventionally, probably at least once a day you're writing a prescription for antibiotics for ear infections. And the recommendation now from the American Academy of Pediatrics, knowing that, if you have a relatively healthy child in front of you and they have an ear infection, even if it's a bacterial infection, and certainly if it's a viral infection, the guidelines are to wait and watch, for 48 hours to see, will that ear infection go away on its own? Yeah. Now, in the meantime, your kids are in pain, right? And you want to do something to help them. And if you could do something to help them with their pain that actually helps heal their ear infections, even better, right? So the other thing that I talk to parents about is Tylenol. Tylenol, is used as a fever reducer and a pain reducer, but Tylenol can actually impair your child's ability to fight their infections because it depletes a very, very important chemical in our body called glutathione. That helps with fighting infections. It's a great antioxidant. It helps support liver detoxification. And so my choice, if we have to use a fever reducer or a pain reducer, is ibuprofen if you can tolerate it. But for ear infections, there are some homeopathic medicines that work great, and there actually are some good studies supporting the use of homeopathic medicines for ear infections. The homeopathic medicines are little blue tubes, right, by Boiron, that you can easily find at Whole Foods. They have lots of strange names to them, but they come as these little sugar pellets that kids love to take. Each of them has a different purpose. Each of them has a different clinical role, so you can't just interchange one for the other.
Mhm.
And that's where I teach my families how to use which medicines. But there's one called Ferrum phosphoricum that is absolutely amazing for earaches. And then in terms of herbal medicines, garlic eardrops. It's a traditional remedy in a lot of other cultures, but there actually was a study looking at garlic and other herbs used in a drop formulation that actually worked better than antibiotics in healing ear infections, right?
Awesome. I haven't heard
Right.
of those.
And those garlic eardrops are pretty easy to find at Whole Foods, right? Isn't that incredible?
Yeah, we have some at our house. Oh my God.
Absolutely. Yep. And then also when your kids are sick, just taking that, really using nutrition, right? Getting them off dairy, because dairy is going to create more phlegm and mucus, right? That's going to be really important. I mean, many of the kids I see are off dairy anyway because they're sensitive to it, but really supporting them while they're sick with really good, warm, easy to digest foods, vegetables, really well cooked rice porridge, things like that are going to be not take a focus from your child's body to help them digest, right? So that means don't give them a lot of sugar. Don't give them a lot of fried foods when they're sick, even if they're asking for it, right? Because yes, they're feeling miserable, but you're going to inadvertently help kind of hinder their ability to heal if you give them treats while they're sick.
Right.
Sugar alone reduces our white blood cells' ability to kind of eat up, viruses and bacteria, within 20 minutes of consumption. So that's not doing your kid's immune system any favors. Right. So that's sort of one of the ways that I use integrative medicine for acute conditions. And hopefully, I've been working on this course that I'm super excited about. It's the Healthy Kids, Happy Kids All Year Long course to teach parents how to use homeopathy and herbs and acupressure points and essential oils for all sorts of different acute care conditions like colds and fevers and flus and tummy aches and earaches. So that, I'm hoping will be a great resource for families so that they know, from a holistic pediatrician standpoint, things that I've used in my practice for my patients and for my own children, that work and have evidence behind them.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, I'm super excited and I want to, get that out hopefully by the fall this year. I've been working on it and I just want to make sure it's a resource that is super valuable for everyone.
Wow, that would be an amazing, yay, you're pregnant gift.
That's right. That's right. Because it's so awful when your children are sick and, you want to know that what you're doing is absolutely the best thing.
Yeah. Wow. Oh,
yeah.
I'm looking forward to seeing this.
But in terms of chronic care, right, these are the kids that come in and, varying levels of sickness, but some of them have severe eczema where they are just itchy and bleeding nonstop from scratching day and night, or kids who are missing school, several days a month because they're out with really bad asthma flares, or they have debilitating anxiety, or they have, ADD, or they have autoimmune illnesses, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, you name it. This is where an integrative approach that incorporates functional medicine is golden. I mean, this is going to, I wish I could say it heals every child, and sometimes it's not always possible. Many kids will be healed, though. Recovery is going to be possible for many kids. And for all kids, they're going to be so much healthier than when they started, right? So this is using that functional medicine approach to heal the gut first and foremost, right? And since this is a Healthy Gut, Happy Child Summit, I mean, that's perfect because it starts with the gut, like I've mentioned before, and that's going to get to one of the root causes of your child's health concerns, right? That's what functional medicine is all about. How do we understand what caused your child's immune system and hormones and gut and brain balance to become so imbalanced that now they're sick, right? So
you have something called the 5 R's of protocol for gut. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I wish I could say it was mine, but that's, it's a 5R protocol that was really coined by the Institute for Functional Medicine. And the 5 R's, this is the simple, but not necessarily easy program. But I'll lay it out for you because it really is simple. And the foundations, the principles are ones that you can even start to implement now, right? Even after listening. But the first R, right? This is how we heal a leaky gut and heal dysbiosis, right? Get our gut regulated again, because then we heal the gut immune system balance, the gut brain balance, the gut hormone balance, right? The gut adrenal balance. And so if we do that, we're going to get our kids so much healthier. So that first R is removing. What do we remove? Any food that your kid's sensitive to. And there's various ways to do that using testing, blood testing, or an elimination diet, which can be a little challenging in kids, but it's doable. Removing abnormal bugs in your gut, right? Removing that dysbiosis, whatever that means, whether it's using coconut oil, right? Caprylic acid from coconut oil, or pharmaceuticals or herbal medicines, and removing toxins. Molds can also be toxic to our gut. So removing anything that's an irritant, right? Removing those triggers for that illness. The second R is repairing the gut lining. So what does your gut need to repair? Well, lots of different things, but probably the three most important things are omega-3 essential fatty acids, right? What we find in fish oils to help repair and soothe the inflammation in our gut lining. Glutamine is an amino acid that's the preferred fuel for our small intestinal lining to repair. And then zinc. Zinc is a mineral that we often don't think about for gut healing, but zinc is really important for healing of any lining, whether it's our skin when we have eczema, whether it's our lung lining if we have asthma, or whether it's our gut lining when we have a leaky gut and dysbiosis. Okay. Zinc you can find in foods like pumpkin seeds, chicken, shellfish. Now, oftentimes though, I do measure zinc levels, and most kids do need a little more than what they can get in their foods, but get in those zinc-rich foods, right? The more we can get from our food, the better. The third R is replace. So what do we replace? We replace whatever our gut might be missing, in this case, our children's gut. And one of the things that is missing the most common are digestive enzymes, right? Enzymes to help break down the food into, as easily absorbed and tolerated small, micronutrients as possible. But I also remind parents and kids that digestion starts in the mouth, chewing, right? Chewing, taking your time, letting all of those enzymes in your mouth start to chew and digest your foods, right? Very important. So we also have to slow it down, right? The fourth R is re-inoculating, right? Getting back in all of those good bugs, right? That's the probiotics, and that's fermented foods, right? The fifth R is what many practitioners pay lip service to, but don't know how to help kids very well, or adults for that matter. And that's restoring or rebalancing the nervous system, right? Rebalancing the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system that's responsible for rest and digest, right? Getting our kids out of that sympathetic overdrive where they're in that fight or flight mode all the time, which many of us as parents are in, right? All the time. But getting to that balancing, that rest and digest. So how do we do that? We need to make sure that our kids are sleeping, right? We need to make sure our kids spend time outdoors. Sunshine, not just for the vitamin D, but being out in nature can reduce negative thinking. Just going for a hike, a 10-minute hike, in the park, and stress reduction. So this is where we have to get practical. We can't just say, oh, teach your kids how to meditate. What adult going out of an office is going to say, I'm going to start meditating tonight if they don't have the tools, and then they're thinking, you want my kid to meditate? You want my kid to sit there with their eyes closed and just be Zen, and mindful for a whole hour? Yeah. So, we need to really help parents understand what that means. And kids can absolutely learn meditation and mindfulness. And when kids do it, it's a much more active process. Kids can have their eyes wide open, telling a story, and they're meditating, right? Because that story is a meditation. They can be walking, in an active walking meditation, right? Kids yoga can be super fun. I do yoga with my kids and it's hilarious, but they're learning, to make these lion faces while they're doing their pranayama breathing, right? I mean, there are different ways to do that for your kids, and some great resources. There's one psychologist. She was on my summit last year. Her name is Dawn Huebner, and that's spelled Huebner. She is amazing. She has a whole series of books called the What to Do Guides for Kids. And they teach children, young children and teenagers, cognitive behavioral therapy techniques. Beautiful. So that they can learn how to relax and be mindful and calm on their own and use these tools for the rest of their lives. And I use these tools. So one of my favorite books of hers is What to Do When You Worry Too Much. But she has What to Do When You Dread Your Bed, right? What to do when your temper flares. One I'm reading right now with my son is What to Do When You Grumble Too Much, right? A kid's guide to overcoming negativity, right? Because a positive mindset is going to help our bodies be physiologically healthier, right? A couple of other resources, Lori Light, Lorilite. She has this book called The Good Night Caterpillar. It's a very short book, but I love it. It's this girl who comes across this caterpillar who's bound up and stressed because he has to find a leaf to eat and form cocoon overnight so that he can become a butterfly. So she takes that caterpillar through a progressive relaxation of unwinding his feet, unwinding and relaxing his arms, unwinding his body and his face, and then his mind. And I've read this story to my kids' kindergarten classes as they're laying on the ground. And by the end of this, 5-minute story, they are just peacefully laying down, eyes closed. It's beautiful. It's amazing. And if kids are more auditory and like to listen to CDs, she has a CD called Dreaming of Ponies, which I love. And then I can't forget to mention one of my colleagues and friends, Amy Saltzman. She's a physician actually here in the Bay Area, and she has a workbook and a CD, one that she made for kids and one that she made for teenagers, called The Still Quiet Place, to teach mindfulness meditation to kids. And kids, like I said, at any age can learn how to meditate. And, I think the younger they are, the more vivid their imagination, the more quickly they're going to get into that mindful state. So try it, and you will learn from your kids too. You will learn how to rebalance yourself as you're teaching your children to rebalance, because these are all tools that we as adults need in our lives too. And our kids will learn, when we start to get frazzled and angry or frustrated or sad about something, they're watching us, right? They're not necessarily doing what we tell them to do. They're doing what we are doing. So we need to model that we can use these tools, that we struggle with the same emotions, that it's just as hard for us as it is for them to calm down when we're angry, but then we try and we can do it, right? And so that's going to help restore ourselves at the same time it's going to help restore our kids. So I think, that last R is one of the most important. And this is also where using that integrative medicine toolkit, because I find for a lot of kids, we get in this healing with the 5R program, but it's the emotional piece that holds things in place. Right? Our cells have an emotional memory, and sometimes past trauma from when we were little, or ongoing if our kids are being bullied or whatever it might be, inhibits the healing. So that's where kids doing acupuncture, working with an energy worker, working with a Reiki master, can really help move that final piece to healing if we're getting stuck.
Yeah. Oh, I am so appreciative that you have shared everything you've shared, but especially this last piece about helping our kids find that peaceful place and be empowered to restore their calm.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
There is a day in the summit that is really devoted to that. So,
good. Good. So important. I've been spending more and more time in my practice on the stress reduction and the sleep piece, because I realize now you can throw all the supplements you want and change diet all you want with the child, but if that emotional piece is not balanced, it's going to be an uphill battle, and they're going to slip back until they can really understand how to help themselves through this process.
Wow, we have covered so much amazing information. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
If there's one thing that you want parents and caregivers to get from what we've been talking about, what would it be?
I would love parents listening to know that whatever state of health your child is in, whether you are just looking to optimize their health, in an already healthy kid, or they have any particular health concerns, that there is so much that you can do to work together with your child to fully nourish their bodies and their brains, and get them thriving. And so don't give up, right? Don't give up. Your kids can be healthy and thriving in ways that you couldn't have ever imagined before. And it's finding the right community, like this community, to connect with. It's finding other mamas who've gone through this, other papas who've gone through this with their kids, finding support groups for kids if needed, finding amazing practitioners to help guide you through the process. But don't give up hope. Right? And the answers are out there, and your child will get there, and you will get there too.
Yes. And we are living in an age where we can access amazing practitioners. Like,
yes,
one with a computer can hear your advice and get your wisdom.
That's right.
From where you are. And I find that is so full of hope for everyone.
That's right. That's right. I mean, in this digital age, as much as it's impacting the way we and our kids are focusing and, being mindful, and, just, I think it's really contributing to this disorganization that all of us are feeling nowadays, and also disrupting our sleep too, with the blue light from our screens. But, as apart from that, it is amazing the world that has opened up for us to be able to connect with community, around the world, with families who are facing similar issues, and with practitioners around the world that you wouldn't have been able to before, and really tap into all the strengths and gifts that different practitioners have to offer, because we all offer a unique perspective, unique experiences, unique training, that we bring with us. And so, the other thing too is, if you start working with a practitioner and you're not finding the results that you would like to, it doesn't mean that practitioner isn't doing a good job. It just might mean that it's time to find a different way and find a different path, right? Everyone has a different journey. And just because your child with your friend's child was healed with one journey, doesn't mean that's going to be your child's journey. But we can learn from each other, right? We can learn from what our friends and our community have gone through.
Yes. And the more we share about our experiences, the better. The more the better. And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really important. And I'm asking, before we wrap up, I'm asking everyone, what is something you're grateful for?
Something that I am grateful for. Wow. I guess I would have to say it's a bit cliche, but it really is my husband and my two children, of course, for being who they are and give me all of life's amazing ups, but also, all of life's frustrations that I learned from, right? But it's really because they have had the patience with me as I was building up the whole family wellness practice. And then now really, building healthy kids, happy kids as a resource for all the parents out there. Their patience and their commitment to helping me with this mission has been more than I could have asked for, with the late nights and sometimes the technological frustrations and the distractions mentally that I have as I'm trying to get everything out to the world. They know how important this work is for me, and they know how important this work is for parents out there. And so I couldn't have asked for a more patient, loving family to help me do the work that I know I really need to do.
Yeah.
So that's what I am really grateful for every single day.
Well, thank you to your family for sharing with us. And thank you to you for your amazing good work and your generosity and your dedication to all children and all these families.
You're welcome. This has been, and I just want to thank you for having me on the Healthy Gut Happy Child Summit, because I think that this information is so key for all parents to listen to. Have a place to start, get inspired, get educated and informed, and find the way, right? Find their path.
Yes. Well, this really has been wonderful, and I'm so thrilled that we're able to offer this all week for free for everyone that wants to watch. And I really do hope you all consider purchasing this summit, not only so that you can share it with the people that mean a lot to you, with your friends, your family, watch it with your mom, your favorite interview, but also so that you have it for reference, so that you can take these steps one little bit at a time. And we'll all get there. We're going to get there.
We will together.
Thank you so much.